I'm John Steinbeck.
I felt and smelled and heard the wind blow up from the Long Valley. It smelled of the brown hill of wild oats.
The resemblance to the castles of Camelot stoked John Steinbeck's imagination as a child. He would later use these formations in Castle Rock as a backdrop for the Pastures of Heaven and the Long Valley. John was once described by a reporter as
a big man. He stands well over 6 feet, and his features, nose, ears, and mouth are large. His eyes are magnetic. He seldom looks away, but instead is always watching you, boring into your inner thoughts.
John Steinbeck grew up in this house on 132 Central Avenue in Salinas. Built in 1897 in Queen Anne style, it was purchased by the Steinbecks in 1900. John was born in the bedroom to the left of the entrance. Steinbeck's father had a steady job until John was 9 years old. The family struggled until Mr. Steinbeck was hired as a manager at Spreckels Sugar Plant while John was attending Stanford. Steinbeck, here age 5, with his younger sister, Mary, age 2, often rode this pony named Jill around the hills and fields of the Salinas Valley. He also had 2 older sisters, Beth and Esther. Steinbeck was very close to his family, both as a child and as an adult. John, his mother Olive, his father John Ernest, and his sisters read avidly. At age 14, he decided to become a writer, and from that point on, he wrote daily. Steinbeck spoke about capturing a child's vision in his work.
I want to recreate a child's world, not of fairies and giants, but of colors more clear than they are to adults, of tastes more sharp, and of the queer, heartbreaking feelings that overwhelm children in a moment.
As a teenager, while working at the Spreckels Sugar Plant, Steinbeck got iron filings in his eyes and had them bandaged for weeks. He was 18 years old and about to go off to Stanford University, 90 miles north of Salinas. His feelings of being an outsider in the conservative farming town of Salinas helped make Steinbeck aware of human loneliness and of those pushed to the margins and excluded from the dominant culture. One high school friend told Steinbeck biographer Jackson Benson,
He wasn't too well liked, and he was just a little bit uppity, and he couldn't help it because it was born in him.
In 1930, Steinbeck married Carol Henning of San Jose. She was a rebel, a nonconformist, energetic, funny, creative, and smart. She believed fiercely in his work, and she held jobs so that he could stay at their Pacific Grove cottage and write. The 11th Street cottage in Pacific Grove, California was built by Steinbeck's father in 1904 as the family's summer retreat. The family often went there as John was growing up, leading him to develop a strong love for the Monterey Peninsula and the sea.
I've always thought of this place as a breeder of stories. Some of them probably I made up, some I may have got through my skin, and some I heard.
He and Carol lived in this cottage from 1930 to 1936, and this is where he wrote Pastures of Heaven, To a God Unknown, the stories appearing in the Long Valley, Tortilla Flat, and In Dubious Battle. Steinbeck started writing Of Mice and Men while living in Pacific Grove. Then he wrote his agent.
I don't know whether I told you. My setter pup, left alone one night, made confetti of about half my manuscript. 2 months' work to do over again. There was no other draft. I was pretty mad, but the poor little fellow may have been acting critically. I didn't want to ruin a good dog for a manuscript. He only got an ordinary spanking with his punishment fly swatter.
George Kaufman's play production of Mice and Men proved to be a hit and won the Drama Critics Circle Award for 1937. With the popularity as novel, play, and film, Steinbeck became a household name. Once Steinbeck had the form for The Grapes of Wrath firmly in mind, he completed the novel quickly in 100 working days. As he wrote, he kept a journal of his work.
Begin the detailed description of the family I am to live with for 4 months. Must take time in the description, detail, looks, clothes, gestures. Got to take it slowly.
The dedication in The Grapes of Wrath is to Carol, who willed it, to Tom, who lived it. This Tom is Tom Collins, the first camp manager of the Arvin Farm labor camp near Bakersfield, also known as Weed Patch. In the fall of 1936, Steinbeck traveled to the Central Valley to write articles for the San Francisco News on the migrant situation in California. While visiting Weed Patch, Steinbeck met Collins. Hard hit by the Depression, these farming communities could not provide sufficient jobs, housing, health care, or schools for the newcomers, and the poor, homeless Okies were unwelcome in many communities. Steinbeck's articles, titled The Harvest Gypsies, were published in a series on October 5th to the 12th, 1936, and serve as the foundation to The Grapes of Wrath, published in 1939. These kinds of shacks housed the fishermen that were employed at the canneries on Cannery Row. This area of Monterey was the setting for Steinbeck's novel Cannery Row and its sequel, Sweet Thursday. From 1902 to 1948, thousands of sardines were processed into fish meal and fish oil until the collapse of the industry.
Sam Chan was behind the counter of Wing Chong Market on Cannery Row for many years. Steinbeck called this Lee Chong's Heavenly Flower Grocery in his novels, describing the market as
a miracle of supply. It was small and crowded, but within its single room, a man could find everything he needed or wanted to live and to be happy.
Steinbeck's closest friend was marine biologist Edward F. Ricketts, who had a small marine biological supply company on Cannery Row. Ricketts' original Pacific Biological Laboratory at 740 Ocean View Avenue burned in 1936 and was rebuilt the same year at 800 Cannery Row.
The relationship between Steinbeck and Ricketts was symbiotic, and many of the novelist's most important ideas grew from conversations about marine biology, visual arts, and music.
Very many conclusions Ed and I worked out together through endless discussion and reading and observation and experiment. We worked together and so closely that I do not now know, in some cases, who started which line of speculation, since the end thought was the product of both minds.
In 1940, Steinbeck and Ricketts traveled to the Sea of Cortez to catalog the marine life of the littoral. Ed wrote a catalog of the species they found, and John wrote a chronicle of their travels for their book, Sea of Cortez. Although Carol Steinbeck was also on this trip, she is not mentioned by name in the book. After John and Carol divorced in 1943, he married his second wife, Gwen Conger, a singer who was 18 years younger. He met Gwen in L.A. in 1939 while avoiding the intense publicity that surrounded the publication of The Grapes of Wrath. Gwen was the mother of his two sons, Tom and John IV. Their marriage ended in divorce in 1948. Steinbeck wrote several works set in Mexico or focusing on Mexican subjects: Tortilla Flat, The Pearl, Sea of Cortez, along with the films Viva Zapata and The Forgotten Village.
In 1947, Steinbeck took a 40-day trip to the Soviet Union with photojournalist Robert Capa. Like Ricketts and Steinbeck's journey to the Sea of Cortez, Kappa and Steinbeck also
wanted to see everything our eyes would accommodate, to think what we could, and out of our seeing and thinking, to build some kind of structure and modeled imitation of the observed reality.
Their journey served as the basis for the book A Russian Journal.
In 1950, John Steinbeck married Elaine Scott. Elaine was formerly one of the first women stage managers on Broadway, and she was passionate about the theater. The two moved from California to New York City, where she rekindled Steinbeck's interest in playwriting.
Steinbeck learned to love New York City, but he missed the sea. So in the early 1950s, John and Elaine bought a small house in Sag Harbor, and from then on, they spent summers at the cottage. Steinbeck had a 6-sided studio house built to write in named Joyous Guard.
I have a little house on the end of Long Island with a tiny bay and big oak trees and a little pier and a small boat that I can go fishing in.
Steinbeck was determined that his young sons would receive a liberal education. So, in 1961, he took them to Europe, with young playwright Terence McNally as their tutor. John was well-versed in European history and could make any tour riveting. In the last 15 years of his life, Steinbeck traveled extensively and wrote often about his experiences overseas. In 1960, after suffering from heart problems, Steinbeck decided to travel across the U.S. to rediscover his country and his people. He took Elaine's dog, Charlie, for companionship. And this journey led to the book Travels with Charlie. When he first asked Elaine for permission to take Charlie, Elaine, who was worried about her husband's trip alone, said enthusiastically,
What a wonderful idea. Why, Charlie can help you and bark if things go wrong.
Elaine, I'm taking Charlie, not Lassie.
Elaine Steinbeck went to school with Lady Bird Johnson at the University of Texas, so John and Elaine frequently saw President Johnson and the First Lady. The president wanted Steinbeck to go to Vietnam in 1966 and report on the war.
I think it was largely curiosity. I've tried to look at nearly every important thing in my time because I think the future of not only of this part of the world, but the whole world depends on pretty much what happens here in the next few years.
Upon his return from Vietnam, Steinbeck wrote a series, Letters to Alicia, about his experiences there. He called it a drifting phantasm of a war. And while he initially supported Johnson's hawkish stance, Elaine noted that
John changed his mind about Vietnam while there, and he came home to write it and spent all the rest of the time dying.
In 1962, John was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature.
I think it would be well to consider the high duties and the responsibilities of the makers of literature. That I am impelled not to squeak like a grateful and apologetic mouse, but to roar like a lion out of pride in my profession and in the great and good men who have practiced it through the ages. Literature was not promulgated by a pale, emasculated critical priesthood, singing their litanies in empty churches. Nor is it a game for the cloistered elect, the tin-horn mendicants of low-calorie despair. Literature is as old as speech. It grew out of human need for it, and it has not changed except to become more needed. The skulls, the bards, the writers are not separate and exclusive. From the beginning, their functions, their duties, their responsibilities have been decreed by our species.